Chapter 10. After Jörn got Derek up the stairs in his house and then towards his office, there he placed the gray redrac onto the seat and got out a writing utensil with pieces of parchment. There, that all you need? Jörn asked after a moment of mentally checking everything. Yeah, should be. Derek nodded, already getting started. Jörn was moving towards leaving the office when one of the villagers appeared in view, grim in expression. Tiban, the search parties found Vala, the villager explained, his voice dark and soft. Jörn froze for a few moments, then clutched his head as sinking realization set in. Last night's search. Cock, I can't believe I forgot about it. After that, though, his shocked expression soon melded into apprehensive fear. And the villager just looked at him in the eyes and remained silent. Jörn's heart dropped to the floor, the air suddenly missing. Derek stopped what he was doing and stared at the two redracs, knowing what had just occurred, but feared to say anything. Without another word, Jörn immediately brushed past the villager and jogged out of his house. Upon arriving at the square, he was greeted by the wailing cries of Vala's mother, clutching at what must be the tattered remains of his clothes. Stained with blood. Jörn felt every possible feeling in his body evaporate, leaving him numb, an empty void as he took heavy steps towards Vala's mother. Even as he took her in his arms in an effort to console her, he still felt nothing. The villagers around them all had their own way of expressing grief. Some looked away, sullen of faces. Others did their best at quelling their rising anger, demanding blood for the death of one of their own. Jörn, Nurses said softly, touching his shoulder. Hesitantly breaking away, Jörn stayed with Nurses as he moved to allow space for the grieving mother, soon joined by her husband, then the other villagers who offered comfort or sympathies. What happened? Jörn demanded in a voice carrying contrasting calmness. We don't know. Nurses shrugged, slowly pacing in place. We were out in the woods, continuing the search. That was when Guice said he found something. When we looked, that was what we found. Nurses pointed at the clothes Vala's mother held. What was around? Jörn pressed. Were there blades or weapons, blood, anything? Nothing. Only thing odd was the patch of ground where we found the clothes. Nurses shook his head with a sigh. It was ... dad. Grass, flowers, all of it a small distance around the fabric, all dead. Call the witch, Jörn declared firmly after a moment. This is her doing. It has to be. Agreed, there's no other explanation. Nurses nodded grimly. That area ... it ... felt foul. Evil. Only the witch could leave such a presence. It seems we must call for the governor's aid then. Jörn sighed, looking beyond the village. Have you seen Demonax on the road by chance? No, we haven't. Nurses shook his head. Let's pray that he returns in time. Derek leaned against his hand as he stared at the parchment. It contained sectioned, clear drawings of how he believes the crossbow worked. Some of it based on what he does know, others by educated guesses. What doesn't help is that he doesn't have a pencil and eraser on hand, just a stick of, hopefully, graphite and not lead. He was curious on how the redracs are able to manufacture pencil lead, yet not actual pencils, but that's a question for another day. Tapping intently on the desk, he continued to stare at the last drawing, the inner diagram of how the crossbow functions, its core mechanism. Relying on what he remembers from physics and his college classes, he tried to guess and reason out how it would work, but he's stuck. He's managed to work out how to keep the bow drawn, as well as the lever that functions as the firing mechanism. What he can't figure out, though, is how the lock will return to its position after firing. Letting out a frustrated sigh, he tapped his stick of pencil lead against the table before stopping. He stared at the stick for a few moments before tapping it again, and that's when it hit him. Crossing out his current drawing, he started a new one. This time, instead of trying to figure out how to internalize everything, he'll just go for simplicity. Something that might help a lot in this pre-industrial type world. Yes, now it's all coming together. The basic design is still there, a bow mounted on a length of wood, But this time, the only cutting of the wood need is just a couple sets of hole in general shaping. The meat will be the arming lever, precisely shaped, but the scale allows it to, hopefully, be trivial to a blacksmith. Yes, it's all working in his head. The bolt fires, the bow is back to resting position. The shooter puts on the arming lever, hooking the bowstring to the arms on the lever, the legs resting against some small metal bolts. With just a couple of flat metal pieces on the side to reset the bow lock, the shooter can then, using the power of leverage, pull on the arming system to redraw the bow, locking it in place, and then putting the lever somewhere else, probably on their belt or harness. Then they just put another bolt on, and boom, ready to go. Although he won't go into it, he thinks he can incorporate a crank gear wheel for heavier crossbows, but right now should be good enough. Giving it one more look over, he grinned widely as he's confident in his work. "Progress?" Lascivious asked as he entered the room. Derek just continued his grin as his response. "Finished. Just need to get this over to Brastus and show him." "May I see if you don't mind?" Lascivious asked. Derek gave a confirming shrug and rotated the parchment, allowing him to approach and lean over the desk to look. Lascivious's eyes glanced and scanned over the drawings, his face growing more and more surprised? Confused? Derek couldn't tell. All he knows was that at the very least, he grew more intense with each passing moment until he looked up at Derek, as if the gray redrac had created a monstrous thing. "Tell me, Derek." He began, his voice low, if somewhat ominous. "Where did you come up with such an idea?" Derek was taken aback, not at all expecting such a reaction. "Well, ... IT quote S an improvement, you know? Like, for bows, you basically have to grow up using them just to be considered decent, right? The form, the consistency, the general instinct, all that. Well, with this, you don't need that. Just spend some time practicing on how to shoot and reload, and you'll basically be on par with a bowman who practiced for many years." "I can see it is." Lascivious nodded, pulling up a chair. "But I was asking more. What made you believe that this, in particular, was worth the effort?" "I don't understand," Derek replied, his confusion just growing all the more. "What exactly are you asking me here? What's your reasoning that this exact design is more practical, feasible, or superior to any other ideas?" Lascivious pressed. "Simplicity," Derek answered promptly. "Not only does it still contain the tried and true concept of using a length of wood to launch an arrow faster than your arm, but by locking the bow in place, done so using an arming lever that exploits leverage, we essentially reduce the strain on the shooter." "Leverage?" Lascivious questioned. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" Excuse me?" Derek was taken aback once more. "You really don't know what leverage is?" Lascivious just leaned back, staring at Derek with an inquisitive stare as he did. "Assume I don't. Explain it to me." Derek was completely unprepared. Perhaps he should have, though. The Dark Ages weren't exactly that well learned compared to humans during his time. So he supposes that the real difficulty is trying to explain physics to someone who has no idea what physics even is. Well, the basic idea is to just reduce how much strength you need to perform the exact same action. The arming lever there, while it doesn't look like much, by using that, you actually require less strength to draw the bow towards the locking pin versus using your hands and arms directly. "How?" Lascivious inquired. "How is that achieved exactly?" "That's just how it works, man." Derek shrugged, no other answers coming to his mind. "For this crossbow, the lever increases how much strength it sees from you towards the bowstring. And in explaining how it accomplishes that, your answer is just, 'That's how it works?'" Lascivious questioned, clearly unconvinced. "I literally do not know how else to explain it to you, dude," Derek said in a snide manner. "And why are you trying to crawl up my ass about this? What about this crossbow suddenly set you off?" I didn't mean to question your ability." Lascivious raised his hands defensively, as well as shifting his tone. "It's just ... IT quote S, quite the brilliant machine. I simply wanted to understand how it works." "Well, I was always better at just showing rather than telling." Derek sighed, already getting things in order. If you can help me get this to Brastus, I'll show you that it works. Pretty sure I'm just really bad at explaining it. I can see you're confident about this. That much is clear. Lascivious nodded, getting up from his seat. All right. Let me know when you're ready. But once we get this to Brastus, you must return to resting immediately. I already don't like how much activity you're undergoing. Help me over there and I'll just sleep the entire day, if that's what you want. Derek sighed, slowly getting up as his exhausted legs already wobbled some. Mousseillon, Kingdom of Swabia. Midday. Artir stormed his way down the hall. He was livid. Someone in his trusted circle betrayed him and allowed knowledge of the Shadow Runners to be let loose. Many influential highborn heard what that lord has stated. Now it's only a matter of time before everybody will start demanding answers as to the identity of the Shadowrunners. Your Majesty, a voice interrupted, stopping him in his tracks. When he looked, his anger surged even more. It was a Shadowrunner, a Redrak clothed in black, leather armor with a hood over its face, hiding within a shadow between the pillars of the hall, fitting. You dare step foot in my palace, vermin? Artir growled fiercely. Only to offer information I'm sure you will most appreciate. The Shadowrunner responded calmly, slowly climbing down to stand on the floor. And given the urgency of such, I have been granted permission to provide it for free. As much as Artir desired the death of the Redrak, he knew how they operate. Information is their currency, not coin. But if this Shadowrunner was willing to give something for free, either they stand to benefit without demanding a price, or they have a vested interest in doing so. With a sigh, Artir decided to humor him. Very well, I'm listening. The incoming Unterkaiser, Alfric III, is very displeased at your mishandling of his father's death, the Shadowrunner began. We have even begun hearing talk of possible secession. Artir froze in place. The very scenario, the only thing that truly terrifies him. Are you absolutely sure there's talk of independence? Yes, the Redrak nodded. However, there's still a chance to prevent it. Alfric is planning several political moves designed to try and foster support for independence. If you can see through them, you just might hold Swabia together, at least during your reign. And you've said that Alfric is displeased at how I was mishandling his father's assassination? Why does he believe that? Artir continued to question. We've spotted someone we believe to be working with one of your nobility speaking to him. The Shadowrunner answered. If you demand an answer at this moment, our best guess is that one or more highborn seemingly stands to benefit from the Easterners making a move for independence. Feeding false information to the momentary Kronprinz, Artir's face broke his seemingly stoic expression, tensing into one of rage. I see. Is there anything else? Nothing further, Your Highness. The Redrak bowed, then promptly melted into the shadows. Artir knew better than to chase or find him. The Redrak is already long gone. That is the one thing he respects most of all. It is their ability to move around without being seen, even in the most guarded of locations, his palace a prime example. Despite his earlier desire to kill that Redrak, he knew it would be supreme foolishness to make an enemy out of the Shadowrunners. He'll be dead long before his men will make any gains. That's why he tries to remind himself that it's better, for the both of them, that he regards them as an asset with their own agenda. After all, if it's virtually impossible to defeat them, why not find some use? And then he had another thought. Could he have at least asked the Shadowrunner if he had knowledge as to whether or not someone in his trusted circle betrayed him and released information about the Shadowrunners' existence to Swabia proper? No, he decided. That would open up a storm he feared to tread. How much they knew about his system, what his men are up to or planning. He'll be overwhelmed with conspiracies and hearsay. Better to focus on one problem after another than drown in a sea of them. Returning to his walk, he rounded a couple of corners before arriving at the main office of his spymaster, Jacques. The relatively aged Hamel was at his desk, no doubt carefully analyzing reports and information relevant to the assassination of the Unterkaiser. Jacques, Artir spoke. The spymaster's head shot up as if startled before relaxing. My liege, to what do I owe the pleasure? He responded, his voice disarming and composed. We have a problem. Artyr stated, closing the door before approaching him. Well, many, but someone has betrayed us. One of the Highborn earlier has just announced the existence of the Shadowrunners. Now it's only a matter of time before everyone, high and low born alike, learns of them. Well, what a day this is turning out to be, huh, my lord? Jacques sighed as he leaned in his seat. At this moment, I can't think of anyone who would have immediate reason to use the Shadowrunners. I wonder if this was more political in nature. No, the political problem is this. Artyr shook his head as he began. Kronprinz Alfric has been manipulated into thinking we're altering the knowledge of his father's death for political advantage. He's begun talking about secession. That brought out a reaction in the spy master, his body tensing as he drew in a breath. How do you know? Artyr stared at him silently for a few moments before answering, Shadow Runner. Damn. Jacques cursed under his breath. At this rate, may as well just hire them to work for us, if we can. Either way, this is indeed a major problem. Is Alfric set on declaring independence? Possibly. Artyr sighed before resting against the wall. He's planning on several political moves to try and cultivate support. That means, if we're extremely careful, we just might preserve Swabia. Shall I devote some men in giving you advance warning? Jacques offered. Artyr thought about it for several moments before shaking his head. No. If he learns I've tasked spies onto him, it will only encourage the belief that I rule through tyranny. I'll have to rely on words and diplomacy to see us through. Are you sure, sire? Jacques asked. You must also consider your perception here in the West. If enough of the Highborn think that you're bending the knee to a disobedient subject, they'll start having ideas of their own. I'll deal with it if it happens. Artyr sighed. Right now, my only concern is preserving the unity of our people. As much as we should have seen it coming, the Easterners are willing to draw blades for this cause. In the name of unity, I say let us sit down and discuss how we can work together moving forward. Understood, my lord. Jacques nodded, though with minor hesitancy towards this course of action. In that case, I shall continue making unraveling the secrecy behind the Unterkaiser's death my top priority. Good. Artyr nodded. Anything yet? The Woodrock we apprehended continues to maintain his innocence, Jacques informed. The Inquisitors are confident in his deceit and will continue to find the truth. Artyr scratched at his chin as he thought. It was then that he had an idea. Jacques, let me speak to the Woodrock. I think I see a way that'll be beneficial in more ways than one. Sire? Jacques spoke in confusion. What do you mean? If it goes the way I imagine, Artyr explained, not only will we be one step closer to finding the murderer, but also obtain an opportunity to endear ourselves into the Eastern Lords. Parnax's village, sometime after midday. After what was practically hell walking through the village, even with Lascidius's careful help, Derek managed to reach Brastus's forge. Hello again, Derek, Brastus greeted with what must be his usual enthusiasm. Ah, and you must be Lascidius, the surgeon from Denisas? I am. It's good to meet you, sir. Lascidius smiled warmly, helping Derek to a seat. I'm sure you've heard it many times already, but thank you for saving Derek, Brastus said, setting down his tool. I wasn't there, but I can tell it was very grim for him. Wamel poison usually is without a surgeon. Lascidius nodded. If you have someone taking care of you, you can survive, but with the price of lasting damage to your body. In Derek's case, because of how fast he was found and in summoning me, he just needs rest and he'll be back to normal. Good, good. Brastus smiled happily, then noticed the rolled parchment in Derek's arm. Are those what I think they are? Crossbow design, yeah? Derek nodded with a grin, already getting up on his own. And I think you'll like it. Simple, easy for a smith to make. If I doubted myself, I would take that as an insult, Derek. Brastus laughed humorously. Either way, let's take a look. After walking into the house and then clearing a table, Derek rolled out the parchment containing his drawings, of which Brastus immediately began to analyze. Hopefully you can make sense of it. I'm, not much of an artist. Derek gave a sheep grin and shrug. No worries, I can see this clearly. Brastus smiled reassuringly, continuing to pore over the drawings. Over the next several minutes, Brastus spent his time studying what Derek drew, asking questions when needed. It was the part that detailed the mechanism of arming the bow that he spent the most time silently, working out in his mind how it would operate. Derek stood there nervously, hoping that he didn't need to go even further to explain something like this. Moving to speak, only to not do so several times, Brastus rationalized and visualized as much as he could. While the bow itself was familiar enough, it was the mechanics behind it he was trying to reason out. It was only when he ran through the entire process in his head that everything clicked together, his face alighting with stunned discovery. "A bet's brilliance, Derek," Brastus exclaimed, slowly grinning wide. "I think you're onto something here, boy. And you were right, the way you designed this. It truly is simple to make, yet I'm convinced it'll work." Derek let out a sigh of incredible relief, his body decompressing from the tension. "Awesome. How soon can you get started?" "I just have the usual sharpening left on the farm tools now," Brastus explained. "Those will be done very quick. I still have enough iron and wood to make at least 2 of these." Crossbows, was it?" "I have enough for 2. Then, if you don't mind," Derek said as he continued to grin, "get it done already. I want to see these things in action." "You and me both, lad," Brastus laughed, already returning to his forge. "I'm guessing you wish to remain here, Derek?" Lascivious asked after a moment. "If it's okay." Derek nodded. "Brastus," Lascivious raised his voice. "If Derek wishes to stay here, don't make him your assistant, understand?" "I'm not a fool, Lascivious," Brastus replied. "Derek is welcome to watch, but even if he insists, I'm not having him help me in any capacity." "That's that, then," Lascivious said as he began to leave. "If I'm needed, you'll know where to find me, Derek." "Got it, thank you." Derek nodded, soon slowly walking out towards the forge. Eastern Devil's Spine Mountains. Although Scaffin was with his men physically, mentally he was somewhere else. His free hand clutching at his chest, his mind constantly wandered back to that person he missed so dearly. Even with everything he has done and experienced, it just didn't feel that grand. It was empty. He was a lone wanderer in an empty, cold world. Nothing appealed to him. Nothing elicited any true emotion out of him. His anger and rage was just something he's always done. For as long as he could remember, he always had a loose temper. Even when he was fighting in the name of the Empire, from a common legionnaire, all the way up to being the supreme commander of the Imperial State Army. Looking back, he realized that it was nothing more than a distraction, something to take this emptiness away, if only for a moment. The only time he truly felt something was when he realized that he wasn't aging. He's no immortal. His time in combat made it clear. If a blade or an axe severed his vitals, a spear plunged into his chest, that will kill him. And he's definitely fallen ill several times in his life. As far as he knows, he's just like everyone else. The only difference is that old age won't claim him. "Lord Scaffin." Venek's voice broke him out of his thoughts. "The scouts have a new report." "Let's hear it," he said, returning to reality. "The Ormo raiding party that's on the move," Venex began, his expression grim. "The scouts fear they've determined where they're going. They're heading towards the Darkwoods province." Scaffin's entire body tensed. "That's the northernmost border of the old empire. There's several villages around, along with one major city. The Ormal are moving to attack the Redrax themselves." "Do we know when they'll reach the first settlement?" Scaffin demanded. "At their current rate, we believe it is either tomorrow or the day after, depending what happens," Venex informed. "Can we catch up to them?" Scaffin continued, growing more tense by the moment. "I'm unsure. The Ormals seem rather determined to reach our land quickly," Venex said with a shrug. "What if instead we head towards the settlement most likely to be attacked and make our stand there?" "Do it," Scaffin said simply. "Yes, sir," Venex acknowledged, then rushed to spread the word to the Centurions. Scaffin could feel his fury rising now. The Ormal never ventured beyond the Devil's Spine Mountains, save for the occasional raid into Hamel territory. But that stopped when the new Swebian king, in a bid to cement his authority, launched several punitive attacks against the Ormal tribes, forcing their compliance. Is it possible that the Ormal have grown bored or frustrated enough that they dare attack the Redrak lands? Dare incite his full fury? Skaffen was content with just the occasional hunt and cleansing to control them. But if they do decide to launch a full attack against his people, he will have no problem beginning a thorough and systematic purge of the mountains to rid this land of the Ormal menace once and for all. When he clutched his chest once more, absent-mindedly holding the amulet beneath his cuirass, he knew there was another reason. Slaughter was his distraction. The heat of battle, the rush to kill before he could be killed. It was the only thing that made him forget how hollow, how empty he felt inside. Maybe that killing, snuffing out lives, was his way of lashing back at the universe? His rage erupting even stronger the way it did as defiance against the hand fate has dealt him. He resigned himself. He didn't care about fate or divine plans. All he cared about was to stop feeling this way. He doesn't want to feel empty anymore. He'd give anything to feel happy again, even if it was for a single day. Chapter 11. Night has come to Parnax. On one end of the village, Derek was sitting anxiously, watching Brastus work his magic, seeing the pieces come together. Once the farming tools were done, Brastus had immediately set himself to the task of forging the crossbow Derek had designed. By the time that the sun had set, many of the pieces were done. The arming lever, the support bolts for it, and the locking nut. Brastus had already finished making the bow, as well as the string itself, made of some kind of tough fabric that had long been used in Redrak bows. And now he was shaping, cutting, and polishing the main body of the crossbow itself, the last step before assembly. On the other end, back in Jörn's Tybin estate, Lascidius was resting in his bed. On the windowsill was a small, flattish bowl containing a burning winter flower, the visible stream of smoke billowing and dissipating outside. That was the method of summoning a Shadowrunner. Find a winter flower, burn it to release its scent, and then wait for a member to smell it and appear. As Lascidius laid in waiting, he couldn't help but wonder that they were taking longer than usual. In his previous contacts with the Shadowrunners, he only waited somewhat of a short time after setting a winter flower alight before one appeared. This time, he doesn't even know how much time has passed. "Hello again, Lascidius." A voice startled him. Somehow, without using the window, a Shadowrunner entered the house and was in the darkest corner of the room. Even with all of the gear upon its leather attire, Lascidius didn't hear a thing. "You took a while," Lascidius commented once he regained himself, sitting up and then moving to the bedside. "Was I interrupting something?" The Shadowrunner shrugged, his cloak flowing gently beside his legs. "Nothing important." "What do you have?" "A few significant things have occurred." Lascidius began, taking a breath. "First, a gray Redrak has appeared, here in the village. He had an encounter with what appears to be a lone whamel stalking the woods. Survived its poison. He'll be fine, just needs a week or two, although his constant walking is concerning me." "A gray Redrak, you say?" the Shadowrunner asked with interest. "And a whamel within this area's woods? I'll definitely note that." "All right, what else?" "The gray Redrak has designed something," Lascidius stated firmly. "And from my travels, I think I know what it is. He's designed a repeater bow, an Imperial weapon." That got the Shadowrunner's attention, if anything, his amazement. "Are you absolutely sure, Lascidius?" "I looked at his drawings myself." Lascidius nodded. "I also looked into his understanding, yet he didn't give me satisfactory answers. Dwelling on it, I can't help but wonder. The Gray Redrak, Derek is his name. I can't help but feel that somehow he's seen such weaponry before, as if they were common, yet he lacks detailed knowledge as to how it operates." "Why do you believe so?" the Shadowrunner asked, resting on the wall. "Because he spent a good part of the day working the design," Lascidius answered, looking outside of the room to the hallway. "I've also noticed crumpled parchment beside the desk he was at. Whoever this Gray Redrak is, he's seen repeater bows before, believes they were a common thing, and has worked to try and rediscover their working principles, which I think he has." "Do you know where this Derek is?" the Shadow Runner questioned, now quite interested. Other side of the village, look for the blacksmith, Lascivious directed. Derek should still be there, no doubt watching the progress of his machine. With a thoughtful nod, the Shadow Runner directed Lascivious to wait as he proceeded to make his way towards the village blacksmith. Staying to the shadows and without a sound, he weaved his way towards his destination, where he immediately spotted the gray Redrak, sitting at the forge and watching the smith work. Upon closer inspection, the Shadow Runner can now see what's being worked on. Although somewhat different, and after a moment of looking through his memory, he's now convinced. Derek, the gray Redrak, is about to reintroduce the repeater bow back to the lands of the old empire. Could he possibly be one of Abet's followers who has left Iron Peaks? No other Redrak outside of the fortress city possesses any learned knowledge that would allow them to recreate the repeater bow. Lascivious has delivered him incredibly valuable information, perhaps enough to get the attention of Sven himself, in spite of his efforts to remain hidden. Although the weapon was incomplete, the Shadow Runner is more than convinced that once assembly was complete, it will work as intended, even with the odd design that he sees. He made his way back to the village's Tybin estate, using the same route he did to approach Lascivious. Once he returned to the room, the surgeon still unaware as usual, that was when he spoke. "You're correct, Lascivious." The surgeon was startled once more, letting out a frustrated sigh. "What gave you doubts?" "Not doubt, just needed to make sure you saw what you saw." The Shadow Runner shrugged. "What you have brought is indeed extremely valuable. While I am here, is there any service you would like from us?" Lascivious stared out the window for several moments as he gave it serious thought. Then he returned his gaze back to the rogue and gave his answer. "I need to know how the Wamel make their poison. I just need a recipe, a list of instructions and ingredients. You know what I'm talking about. The one that induces ironbone." "Yes," the Shadow Runner said before nodding. "We're aware of many poisons and their alchemy. I'll look. If we don't have it, then I assure you we'll get it." "Thank you." Lascivious gave a slight bow. "I won't be in this village for long. I suspect that by the time you acquire it, I'll be back in Denesis. Find me there, understood?" The Shadow Runner nodded before seemingly vanishing from the shadows. With a quick sigh, Lascivious moved to extinguish the burning winter flower before stopping. It was already smothered, just mere embers and ash remaining. "Right, here will do." Hagrim directed after surveying the area. Promptly, the boys he summoned returned to their own boys, spreading the word that they'll make camp here. The Ironhead boys is just now exiting the high rocks, starting to see some flat land broken by tall greenies. He knows. Hagrim and the boys are now crossing from their territory into the blood-covered Reddies. Won't be long before they start seeing some of that Gets camps, and when they do, that's when the fun will start. Boss," Tora said as he jogged up to him, "we's got a problem. Some of our boys are saying they saw the blood-covered Reddy and his boys getting close." "How close?" Hagrim demanded, having a mix of excitement and frustration in him. "We still ahead a bit, so the boys here ain't in any danger, boss," Tora reported, glancing behind him. "But if we stay here after the big shiny in the sky comes out, they will catch us. But our sneaky boys don't think that's what'll happen." "How so?" Hagrim questioned, now curious as to what that Reddy's plan is. "They saying that they ain't going for us. They think the Reddy's trying to get to his camp before we do, boss," Tora explained. Hagrim gave a growling scowl. If he was in the Reddy's position, he'd also head straight for the camp. Home advantage, more boys to call on, and you force the Git to attack you. "So that's his game then," Hagrim muttered, thinking things through. After a moment, Hagrim gave a little grin. "Tora, spread the word. Tell the boys that if they want more of the shinies, they'll go ahead of us and head straight for the camp. First swing, first shiny." Right, boss, whatever you say." Tora nodded, not entirely understanding, but more so not wanting to piss the boss off. He then dashed off, going to the thickest concentration of boys first. Hagrim found himself the tallest spot of dirt and looked out towards the horizon. He can already see it. Even if the blood-covered Reddy gets there first, he has to deal with a bunch of boys ransacking his camp, no doubt also destroying whatever stuck killers are put down, killing or banging up his boys. He grinned. No, that was his camp. He's just decided that the ready is done borrowing it from him. And the things he's smashing, they can be fixed anytime. And the boys who won't look at him as boss, just like any other, they'll either listen or get smashed. Hagrim can already feel his appetite for slaughter and carnage rising. Even thinking and imagining how it'd go is getting him riled up. If he can't smash the blood-covered ready in a good old-fashioned fight, he'll still get a win by banging up his things and boys. And when he does, that ready won't mock him anymore now, will he? Flensburg, Swabia. Onwald knew where he was. He was dreaming, and he recognized what would happen. Just as always, it was a dark void of nothing. No smell, no sight, nothing. He braced himself for what was coming. And it didn't take long. That same evil laughter pierced his ears. Onwald always thought that he would go deaf from how intense it was. But now something has changed. Within a blink, he can see pieces. Glass? A mirror? No, it was glass. It felt familiar. Onwald can feel his mind gravitating to something, yet not getting there. Like when you see a familiar face, yet no matter how hard you try, you just simply cannot recall why they're familiar. And then they moved. Slowly but surely, the many glass fragments began sliding towards each other. And as Onwald studied them, he saw something, insignificant on its own. But when seeing across the entirety of the fragments, they too are a piece of something. And as they drew closer, a warm orange light began to shine from behind the glass. And then it revealed itself. Although formless, upon seeing them on the glass fragments, Eonwald's mind compelled him to declare it to be people. Were they Hamel, Amel, or Demel? It was unclear. All he knew was that these were people of some sort. And in a final silent crescendo, upon touching each other, the orange light shined brightly, enough to make Eonwald squint. The glass fragments fused together into a rectangular shape, perhaps a door. But in that door, there stood a figure. Surrounding the figure was a manner of all sorts of dark scenery. Corpses, blood, destruction, fire. And although the figure appeared to be haggard and weary, Eonwald felt something different. Pride, hope. And then the figure slid backwards, gaining distance. Joining the figure below, yet not shorter of height, were three more. Just as the first, they too were formless. Eonwald saw no clues as to who they might be, just oily shadows that would represent some individual. But he noticed that the bright orange light also moved, staying behind the first topmost figure. That must be a leader of some kind, no doubt. And then the laughter pierced the air again. The rectangular glass shape cracked, slowly drawing across the figures before shattering back into many fragments, where they soon turned into molten iron, burning through the ground at his feet. And then a booming thunder accompanied what felt like a hammer smashed into his chest. Eonwald coughed and wheezed for several moments before finding the strength to rise to his feet. Now it was back to what he had seen before. The same scene of incomprehensible death and destruction. The dead field, where even the grass knew no life. Massive craters across the landscape, some filled with the bodies of Hamel knights. And the air itself choked with the green poison that assaulted Eonwald's nose, nearly making him retch and vomit from the smell alone. His chest alight with burning pain with each breath he took. And then the clang of battle appeared. Just as before, two shadows fought each other. A Hamel knight with a sword, the other a Redrak with hammer. They exchanged several blows before the final segment revealed itself. The sky exploded in bright, terrifying fire. And above the distant mountains, a single, massive eye opened itself upon the sky. With one final laughter, a demon blade appeared in front of Eonwald and ran itself into his chest. It was there that he awoke, gasping and shuddering in a cold sweat. Still within his bed, he knew what he must do. Launching himself to his feet, rapidly getting dressed, he raced his way down the hall and towards the tribune's hall. As before, he need only to take his position within the center of the circular depression before they arrived, the tribunals taking their seats in short order. "What have you seen, Grandmaster?" Dalin asked, a strange mix of concern and eagerness in his eyes. "A completely new scene has appeared before me, Tribune," Eonwald explained. While it is still fresh, I wish to describe only that. Please do, Haim encouraged softly. After the beginning, where there was a void, followed by the evil laugh, Ayenwald began. I saw pieces of glass before me, and upon them they had the look of unknown shadows, yet I was convinced they were people. The glass pieces began to reform themselves slowly, and as they did, a bright light began to shine from behind the glass. It was then all the pieces reformed themselves into one greater object, and the light behind them had the intensity of our sun itself. They revealed something, a new figure. I saw death and destruction around him, and through his body I can tell that it has affected him. But that is not what I felt. I felt pride and hope, as if despite what has happened, I still believe that tomorrow is a brighter day. Then 3 more shadows joined the first. They were placed below the first, despite being of similar size. What I also saw was that the bright light I had been seeing moved to stay behind the first figure. I have no doubt that must symbolize that man as a leader. What the other 3 mean, I do not know. And then the laughter cracked the glass mirror, growing larger until it all broke apart once more, each fragment turning into great balls of fire that burned through the ground I stood on. And that is when I was taken back to the dead field, the dueling Hamel and Redrak, and that evil eye with the demon blade. As soon as the Grandmaster finished delivering what he had seen, the hall was filled with the hushed sounds of conversation and discussion. As before, the Grandmaster returned to his chambers to allow the tribune to engage in discussion of what they have heard. The Grandmaster said that there were shadows upon those glass fragments, right? Darrin began, once he met up with Ham. I wonder, could that symbolize the unification of a group of people? The way it was presented, a shadow upon each fragment of glass. And when they formed into one greater whole, there was one figure with a bright light behind him. I have no doubt, Haim responded, crossing his arms. That sequence must symbolize a man uniting people. Whether it is of his own or something else, I am not sure. In fact, does it truly symbolize uniting a race or a wide variety of individuals? I'm not so sure it is that, Darrin said, scratching his chin. The glass, the shadows. Wait, could it actually? What? Haim demanded. Don't leave me out of it. Let me hear it. It's absolutely clear that the glass plays a role. It represents something, Darrin began. With the way it was shown, is it possible that those shadows could be Redrak? Think back to our records. What race across all known history is associated with glass? The Redrak Empire. Haim answered once it hit him. But they've lost nearly all of their knowledge during the Sundering. They no longer had the skill they once had with glass shaping. I don't think it necessarily means they're rediscovering their past. Darrin shook his head. I think it's just the dream's way of symbolizing the Redrak people. If so, then that must mean that someone has the ability to unite them once more, revive the Empire. Could it be the Crimson Redrak? Haim asked. He clearly has the martial ability based on his adventures within Athul's shield. Is it possible that he has decided that it's time to go even grander? Conquer the disparate settlements? Darrin took some time to process before he answered. No, I don't believe that. I think the way the glass moved, I think that symbolizes that. Whoever is uniting the Redraks, he's doing it in a way that doesn't involve war. Remember, the fragments willingly reform themselves based on how Ayenwald explained it. You sure? Haim questioned. Based on what I've heard from Swebians who traveled in their lands, the Redrak seems to, despite having great nostalgia for their empire, seem rather apathetic towards any attempt at reviving it. I find it hard to believe that they would suddenly decide to give it a try. Which bring us back to that one figure after the glass formed itself, Darrin said with emphasis. I'm convinced that war is not a method at which this man unites the Redrak people. I'm of the mind that he possesses such an aura that his words alone will inspire the people to rally around him. Right, those 3 figures. Haim nodded. After a moment, he looked at Darrin with a face of possible realization. What if one of those 3 figures below the supposed leader is the Crimson Redrak himself? Why would you think that? Dalin questioned curiously. We already know how powerful that man is, Hain began. He has clearly demonstrated his ability to effortlessly slaughter the Ormel, who practically live for war itself. How would you be looked at if you were to manage to gain the fealty of such a warrior? To have him bow to you? Dalin thought this over for a moment, his face gradually growing more stunned as he became convinced. You're right. Assuming that this man desires to form an empire, gaining the allegiance of such a warrior would be an excellent move. So then, where do the other two fit in then? Who are they? Dalin, Haim, one of the tribunes said as they jogged up to them, nervously glancing back. One of our members is becoming impatient. They're starting to demand that we inform King Arthur of what we've heard. I'll talk to them, Dalin said with resignation, already moving. He didn't need to be guided. He just had to follow the voice of what sounds like an angry man. We can't just rush to conclusions. We need to wait until we clearly know. We do know, the junior member interrupted. War is coming. Swabia will find itself fighting the Redrak vermin soon. We must warn King Arthur of this immediately. We will not do such a thing. Dalin spoke firmly above the crowd, who immediately backed away, save for the dissenting tribune. We are still unraveling what is to occur. Not everything is clear yet. It is clear, the young Hamel scowled. The vermin are starting to prepare their attack against us, and they will be using monstrous weapons to do so. We can't allow it. And why are you so certain that it is the Redrak who are the aggressors? Dalin questioned, crossing his arms as he looked disapprovingly at the hot-headed tribune. What? Because they're Drakfolk, the tribune snarled. They envy our land. Of course they'll attack us. You really think so? Dalin pressed with an unamused expression. What about the dream makes you think that way? Convince me? There are Hamel bodies strewn about the field that Grandmaster Ayanwald witnessed, the tribune began, but not once has he ever described Redrak bodies. That just says there could be war between Hamel and Redrak, Dalin dissented. That doesn't tell us why it happened. We're not seeing or hearing anything that explains what could cause the war. I just told you, the man snarled fiercely. The Redrak, all the Drakfolk, has always envied us since the beginning of time. They're constantly scheming when we're not looking. And where in the dream convinces you this is the case? Dalin continued, his own impatience starting to wear thin. Nowhere, because the dream is not needed in this case, he declared. That whole glass scene is irrelevant. The demon blade thing is irrelevant. All that's important is the scene of war. Dalin took in a deep breath before he began. You're wrong, and here is why. You completely misunderstand what the dream is. It is not a prophetic messenger of the future. It is an imperfect look at what could happen. What we are seeing is possible, not a certainty. The Sundering is an excellent example that proves that theory. As for the dream itself, here's how I will explain it. Imagine yourself placed in a very dark hallway with a torch. At the beginning, there's not a lot to see, but you still walk forward. That is dreaming. Each time you take a step, something is revealed. So let's say on the first step you see a square. Is it a box, a painting? You don't know, so you take another step. Another dream. As you do, it becomes clearer. Now it's a painting. But a painting of what? Naturally, you take another step to see what it is. Another dream. Now you start to see some detail. Perhaps a tree or an ocean or a crowd of Hamel. You take one more step and it starts becoming clearer. This is the point where you, I, all of us are at. With this latest dream, we can see we're looking at a painting and we're seeing enough detail to make a guess at what it is. What you're doing is making a guess and stopping there. What we're doing is exploring what it could possibly be, still wanting to take another step. The dissenting tribune just stood there, processing what he is hearing. That is the inherent danger you fail to realize. Dalin continued, his tone gentle. We Hamel have a tendency to rush to conclusions. We will take whatever is enough to satisfy our preordained judgments and beliefs and use it. And that is further complicated by factors that change on a daily basis. Take King Arthur, for example. In addition to his own personal views and beliefs, he has his subjects to protect, nobility to listen to. If you rush to inform King Arthur of what we know currently, you will place him in a difficult position. If he declares war on the Redrak people in an effort to preemptively save his subjects, and we come to learn that it is indeed the Hamel who creates war, you've single-handedly repeated the sundering, destroying an entire race because you didn't wait. On the other hand, if Artir holds on to the information, and the Highborn learns that he's withholding such knowledge, you have completely destroyed his authority, throwing Swebia's future into uncertainty. Do you understand what it is I'm saying? The Tribune was silent for several moments before he finally nodded. Yes, sir, I think I do. Good. Dallin nodded before sighing. Once discussions are done, please take time to reflect on what I've said. It's an extremely important concept you must understand. Kriegsberg, Swebia. Alfric was on his throne amidst the empty hall, chin resting on interlaced fingers, eyes staring at something unseen on the floor. Beside him was his ever-faithful companion, Genor, who felt helpless and useless before his friend. Genor, Alfric finally spoke. Yeah, he replied, ears straightening some. Have you ever wondered why my father was so hesitant at going further? Alfric asked, straightening his posture. He's made it clear that he strongly hates how the Westerners are treating the Drakfolk, yet every time he's been challenged, he backs down. Why? Genor sighed. My best guess? He still holds hope that there's a peaceful method that could be done. He didn't want blood to be spilled. Hamel blood, Alfric muttered with distaste, his expression slowly growing more dark. For all his posturing and politics, he won't act when it's needed. Okay, I think you're starting to go a little too far there, Genor cautioned, starting to grow worried. Trust me, my friend, your father genuinely wanted to try and help us lead better lives. He just wanted to be absolutely sure that there was no other option before drawing his blade. Alfric went quiet for several moments, sighing as he thought. After some time, he finally spoke. I know, yeah. It's okay, Alfric, I'm not offended, Genor assured, gripping his friend's shoulder. But I can't help but worry. What's going in your head, my friend? Many things, he answered, sighing again. I'm no fool. This is an excellent time for some schemer to manipulate politics. That Redrak? I won't trust him blindly. While I am sure he aims to help other Drakfolk captured by Wamel hunters, I do not trust what he has brought us. So, what are you saying then? Genor asked with a shrug. After several moments of thinking over his answer, Alfric delivered. While I understand my father's wish of peaceful understanding, I'm afraid I don't share his patience. I will not stand by and watch my kin deliver such needless cruelty upon those who have also been shared the Promel's gift. I'm going to make it undeniably clear to Artir that he will respect the Drakfolk, or I will be forced to distance myself from such a lord, forced to create a safe haven for the Draks. Genor was silent for a moment, thinking over what he has heard, before he slowly grinned. With respect, my friend, I'd say it's about time. In that case, I know how to make it clear from the very start. Alfric grinned back, getting up from his throne. Go find Klaus. Tell him to send a message to the Swabian king. After that, find every highborn here in Grunismere you know, and let them know if they'd like to visit the king themselves. And I'm sure you know who I mean, yes? Genor grinned even wider. I know exactly who you mean. Chapter 12. The moon was unobstructed by any clouds in the night. Based on its position, Scoffin guessed that it was close to midnight. As much as he should be sleeping for the coming morning, the fact that the Ormel was moving to attack a Redrak settlement bothered him, so instead he was continuing his practice. Knees bent, and both hands gripping his Spatha Maximus, he visualized an Ormel preparing to strike. Swiftly knocking the slasha out of his hand, Scoffin followed up by twisting his wrists and cleaving through the torso. Visualizing another Ormel charging straight after, Scoffin redirected the momentum of his swing into an overhead strike, striking with every powerful fiber of his strength. When his blade struck the earth, over half of the length buried itself into the ground, the force of his swing generating a shock wave in the air that blew outward with enough intensity to bend much of the flowers and grass in front of him. Breathing heavily for several moments, he pulled his blade out from the ground, returned to his stance, and prepared for another round. Commander, Vinex spoke, carefully approaching him. Dire reports from the scouts, sir. Scaffin felt a surge of anger within him. How dire? The Ormal knows what we're up to. Vinex began with a sigh. Scouts have spotted a group of raiders breaking off. They think the raiders are trying to hit a village before we arrive. Kak, Scaffin cursed fiercely, breaking his stance and then facing Vonex. What's the terrain between us and their most likely target? Mostly woods, but in general, flat, sir, Vinex answered. Scaffin knew who to send. The only company that can beat the Ormal in time. The Death Riders, legionaries trained on magic gliders and equipped with deadly polearms, fitted with a head that combines a hasta, hammer, and bladed edge. Some were even trained to use repeater bows, albeit with weaker strength. Even to this day, Scaffin always remembers the first battle he fought with them. Send out the Death Riders, Vinex, Scaffin ordered. Tell them that as soon as those Ormal are cut down, they can rest up at the nearest village, as well as warn them what's coming. Yes, sir, Vinex replied, and immediately rushed over to the Death Rider Centurion. All right, lad, looks like we're ready then, Brastus said with a nod. After spending much of the day, going into the night, working on the crossbow under Derek's supervision, they're finally done. Derek was grinning like a madman as he looked over the weapon. Final step is to make the bolts, Derek said, gripping Brastus's shoulder. Basically just take arrows but make them smaller. Figured that would be the case. Brastus nodded, sliding his fingers across the weapon's body to check for any missed areas. And I hate to cut your fun short, but it's getting rather late. Don't you worry, though. You don't need to ask. Making these bolts will be the first thing I'll do in the morning. Awesome. Thank you. Derek smiled. Really, thank you so much for doing this. I promise you won't regret it. Any time, Derek. Brastus chuckled in appreciation. Now then, do you want me to help you back home? I'm staying with Jörn so far, Derek said. If you don't mind, help me back to his place. Of course. After placing the crossbow in a safe location, Brastus proceeded to help Derek over to the Tybon's estate. As they walked through the village at night, Derek couldn't help but take in the scenery around him. There was also something about places at night that seems calming, serene even. He noticed that there were torches placed in various locations, at least along the route he was going through, in addition to those mounted on each side of the entrance to each building. Derek couldn't help but begin imagining what would come next, what would happen after his crossbow was revealed. He started to worry that he would be looked upon as a genius, everyone in the village coming to him to try and solve every problem they encountered. He wasn't sure how'd he handle it. But on the other hand, he'll take whatever opportunities he has to try and make this world a better place. A world closer to the one that was robbed from him, from humanity. Derek, there you are, Jörn exclaimed after the duo rounded a corner. I was starting to look for you. How'd it go? It's all finished, Jörny, Brastus explained with a grin. Derek's crossbow thing is ready. Just need to make some special arrows for it, and we'll show it off tomorrow. Good, Jörn smiled as Derek was given to him. I must admit, I'm actually looking forward to it. Think you can sleep tonight, Derek? Honestly, I got no idea. Derek laughed a little with a shrug. But I promise you, the crossbow is going to make fighting a bit easier in a lot of ways. Is that so? Jörn asked. Well then, consider me even more eager to see tomorrow. Thank you for helping him, Brastus. Have a good night. You too, Tybon. Brastus waved as he started returning to his home. Now then, let's head home and get some sleep, huh? Jörn smirked as he started assisting Derek the rest of the way. You especially. Going to need it for what's coming. I'll try, man. Derek chuckled a bit. After passing through another section of the village, Jörn's estate in view, that was when the Tybon made a realization. That's right, he exclaimed, pointing to a house. Demonax returned while you were with Brastus. He wants to talk to you whenever you're free. Demonax? Derek asked with a shrug. He was the young man I sent to get Lascidius, Jörn explained. Normally, getting to Danasus by glider takes an entire day, assuming you set out in the morning. But that man took a big risk by pushing himself through the night. Shit, Derek muttered. Yeah, I'll make it the first thing tomorrow. In addition to Lascivious, I owe Demonax big for basically saving my life. That you do, friend. Jörn chuckled some. He and Derek finally made it home. As soon as they passed through the estate's entrance, they both felt the sudden creep of exhaustion coursing through their bodies. Without even a word, they both made their way up to the next floor and proceeded to crash onto the master bed. Despite the built-up anticipation and excitement towards the coming demonstration, his aching muscles demanded sleep, which caused Derek to quickly doze off upon settling into bed. Jörn, on the other hand, took the time to wrap Derek in his arms, continuing to protect him during the night. And with the moon shining brightly through the window, Jörn and Derek proceeded to sleep through the night. Outside the window, near the tree line, a mysterious figure moved away from the foliage, retreating deep into the woods. An order Devios never thought he'd hear anytime soon. Scafin has ordered his men to take up their gliders and ride ahead to intercept a particularly excited bunch of Ormal, no doubt succumbing to their own greed at the prospect of despoliation. Grinning throughout the entire ordeal, he fetched his own personal glider from the transport cart. After quick inspection, he felt some relief that nothing kept it from being usable. He only needed to get his terrifying polearm, and he was good to go. Deviox! The centurion of the scouts approached. We've managed to confirm where the advanced raiders are going. It's a village named Parnax. Nothing of note, just a quiet village some ways away from Denisas. Anything we can use? Devio questioned, already seated on his glider, one hand resting his polearm on his shoulder, while the other gripped the glass sphere that was the focus. Not a lot there, the scout centurion shrugged. If you're desperate, there's a blacksmith there who could probably be of use. Other than that, nothing comes to mind. Well, ideally, we won't have to set up in Parnax itself. Devios sighed. But whatever happens, we'll make it work. We won't dishonor Scafin by letting some Ormal trample us. In that case, I've got nothing else. The centurion nodded and began to walk away. We'll keep an eye on the main force. I'll send someone to you if trouble's incoming. Thanks, we'll watch for him, Devio replied, motioning with his polearm. After giving himself several moments to focus, he began pushing the winds of magic into the focus, which proceeded to drive the gear wheel. After making sure he obtains his balance, he made his way over to where his men were, already ready to move. All right, listen up, Devio began, making his voice loud and clear. The Ormal we've spotted just couldn't control themselves. Some of them have ran ahead to try and get first claims on looting. Scaffin's ordered us to stop them. We're the only ones who can catch up to those Ormal before they hit the village. So the plan is simple. We ride out, find that greedy group, and run them through. Win or lose, we then move on to the village itself and warn the inhabitants of what's coming. Questions? No, sir, all the men replied in unison. In that case, no time to lose, Devio shouted, pointing the way with his weapon. We're pulling a night job here, so if you want sleep, make sure you kill the lot of them. At once, Devio and his company rode off away from Scaffin's force, aided by the techno-sorcery of their two-wheeled gliders. They rode fast over the grass fields of what used to be the northern border of the empire. For most of the travel, it was just them riding through scenic views of Etel, the distant peaks of the Devil's Spine Mountains slowly disappearing over the horizon, wading through old roads and paths between thick forests, and cruising over gentle rolling hills. The moon shone high in the sky, signaling midnight, when Devio spotted movement in the distance. Thanks to the light of the moon, it didn't take long before he knew what it was they found. It was the raiders that broke off from the main group, the Ormal, whose insatiable greed for battle and loot driving them forward. There they are, Devio shouted, thrusting his weapon high in the air, then lowering it to a couch position. Riders, loose formation. It took only half a minute for the riders to spread themselves out, first for the order to spread, then to actually maneuver themselves. It was there that they poured in even greater concentration of magic, accelerating themselves to incredible speed. Each and every rider had their own target selected, their polearms couched to exploit the hasta tip. They were already in full charging speed when the Ormal began to realize their approach. As always with the Ormal, All they knew was that a fight was coming and began to ready themselves, not sparing any thought to analyze the situation. W.O. counted on it. He could see the whites of their eyes by the time terrified realization hit their faces. With a piercing roar, DVO slammed his weapon right through the chest of the Ormel he sighted. While one would expect a sharp impact, the finely pointed hasta, combined with his incredible speed, allowed for it to cut right through without resistance. In a split second, his weapon sank deep into the Ormel, stopping right when the other sections made contact, lifting the Ormel straight off of his feet. This exact event was replicated across every rider who charged into the Ormel, spearing them on contact. Tightening his grip, W pushed his kill into the ground, causing it to cleave out through the Ormel's shoulder. Slowing down to maneuver, DVO began preparing himself for conventional combat. After skidding along the ground, he kept himself upright and loosed another concentration of magic, re-accelerating towards another group of living Ormel. This time he wasn't going to charge. Through rigorous training of balance, as well as giving a final surge of magic to maintain speed, he gripped his weapon with both hands now. An Ormel attempted to strike him as he passed. That creature did not account for the incredible reach his weapon had. Now switching to the bladed edge, Davios made a strike, swinging his polearm straight for the Ormel's neck. And in one smooth motion, the Ormel's head was launched off his shoulders, spinning until it crashed into the ground, the neck squelching out ropes of blood in tune to the still living heart as it collapsed to the ground. None of the Ormel possessed any hasta or other weapons that can provide the distance needed for safe attacks. Like a farmer to his field, the riders reaped the heads off of Ormel, as dictated by their training. Devios racked up over 10 kills before he could find no other living Ormel. Slowing to a stop, he brought his fingers to his mouth and let loose a loud, shrill whistle. There the riders soon slowed to a stop, slowly beginning to let loose triumphant cheers. It was a complete slaughter. As much as Divio basked in this victory, he knew it was only because the Ormel were savage beasts incapable of tactical thinking or forethought. They were disorganized, motivated only by greed, and lacked the weaponry to counter his forces. Raising his weapon and giving it a good flick to remove any loose blood, he returned it onto his shoulder and gave the order to ride towards Parnax. As easy as it was, this was only a small rabble broken off from a much larger force. And those ones were led by an Ormel boss who possessed some semblance of tactics and leadership. The true Battle of Parnax will no doubt be not as simple as this one. It was sometime past midnight, possibly an hour or two, before Divio and men arrived at what must be Parnax. Divio noted how peaceful the area was. It's easy to disconnect yourself from the cruelty of this world if you were to live here. As much as he hated giving these people a rude awakening, they need to know. With the men dispersing through the village, both to ensure it was safe for the moment, as well as getting an idea of the layout, Divio searched and found the T-Bon's estate. Taking in a breath, planning out his words, he delivered firm, short knocks upon the door. He listened closely for signs of a response. He didn't hear anything for several moments. He was just about to knock again when he heard movement on the other side of the door. Then the T-Bon himself opened it. "Do you know who are you?" The T-Bon's annoyed tone immediately changed to concerned surprise upon seeing Divio. "Are you the village T-Bon here?" Divio asked. After a nod, he began. "I'm Centurion Divio, under the command of Commander Scafin. My men and I rode ahead to warn you that an Ormel tribe is on their way here to attack and loot the village." The T-Bon was rocked with terror after hearing his words. "What? Why? We have nothing here. Why are they coming here?"
"It's the Ormel, I'm afraid." Diviok sighed. "Even if you don't have anything of value, they love burning and killing. But don't worry, Scafin and the rest of his forces are marching with all haste here. We'll defend the village if the Ormel somehow gets here first." The T-Bon's face slowly turned to relief once he registered another important piece of information given to him. "You said you're commanded by Scafin, right? Then I fully believe that we'll be safe under your hands. Still, when exactly do you expect them to come?" "At the earliest, sometime midday tomorrow," Diviox answered. After several moments of thought, The Theban gazed at Diviox with a determined expression. I know people around here who can help. Our village messenger, Demonax, has just returned, but you can count on him to run messages of importance. Brastus may not seem much, but that man has forged many weapons before settling down here. Just give him what he needs, and he'll keep you in fighting shape. We also have Lycidius, a surgeon from Danasus, who can tend to your wounded. Lastly, an outsider I've been caring for, Derek, has just designed an incredible weapon that was due to be demonstrated tomorrow. If it works, you'll have a powerful bowman at your disposal, but not Derek. He's still recovering from Wamel poison. What kind of weapon? Diviox questioned, as soon as he heard about that last bit. He calls it a crossbow, the Theban explained. More powerful than your standard bow, yet only need just a short amount of training to be just as dangerous as a bowman. The name was different, but that idea, it seemed familiar to Diviox, the way it was described. Jern, who are you talking to? A voice sounded from deeper in the estate. Ah, speaking of which, let him explain it, Jern said with a grin, then motioning for Diviox to enter. Come, come. Nodding, Diviox entered the house. As is expected, it was lavishly decorated and furnished, as befitting a man of his status. The finest plants arrayed in perfect order along a wall, an expertly crafted table and seats, and a finely woven carpet on the floor. Derek, there's some news you should hear, Jern said, walking up the stairs. Once Diviox settled into a chair by the table, Jern was helping a gray Redrak, who must be Derek, down the stairs. Based on the faint wobbling of his legs and the stiff movements, Jern was telling the truth about recovering from Wamel poison. What news? And who's this guy? Derek said, in a hushed tone, though not quiet enough for Diviox to miss it. Shall I make the introduction, sir? Jern asked Diviox, guiding Derek to another seat by the table. No need. Diviox shook his head, then faced the gray Redrak. A part of him was greatly surprised at seeing such a man. Gray furs are a very rare sighting, and it has been said that those within their presence or witnessing their birth are blessed with great fortune. Derek, correct? I'm Centurion Diviox, under the command of Scaffin. I'm here to warn everyone that an Ormel tribe is on their way here to attack and loot this village. Derek was silent for several moments, staring at Diviox all in the meanwhile, before he finally spoke. When will they arrive? Midday tomorrow at the earliest, Diviox answered. And what are we looking at? Derek continued, leaning on the table. Numbers? Equipment? Diviox was surprised by this line of questioning. Worst case, over 700 Ormel warriors. Most of them lack armor, like you see on me, but they do have gladius, axes, and clubs. Derek leaned back in his seat, bearing a disturbed expression. What about you and your men, Diviox? What can you do? Diviox was at a disadvantage with this one. He expected to try and reassure him, just like Jern, that he was safe. Instead, he can't help but feel as though he's talking to someone experienced in combat. I'm the Centurion of the Death Riders. See my weapon? When we're on our gliders, our charging attacks can cause incredible devastation to enemy ranks. But thanks to the clever design, you see, you're just as dangerous as you are mounted. Derek finished, surprising Diviox once more. You can slice through arms, smash armor, or counter cavalry. Not only do you have more reach, but the length also makes your attacks even more powerful. Have you fought before, Derek? Diviox couldn't help but ask, thoroughly taken aback by the level of understanding the gray Redrak possessed. Not really. Derek shrugged with a stammer. I was just bored one day, you know? Diviox stared at Derek for several moments, unconvinced by his answer. But it was from that surprise that spawned a thought, one he never would have entertained before, but given the unusual circumstances here, it provided him with enough of an open mind to start thinking.
Derek's name sounds very close to the one Venex was talking about. Tarak, was it? We need Brastus, Derek muttered, pushing himself off of his seat. That crossbow is useless without bolts to fire. Hold on, Derek, Jaunt exclaimed, delicately grabbing the gray redrak. I'll go and tell him. You stay here, where it's safe, okay? The Ormal aren't here yet, are they? Derek asked with a shrug. Until they are, it's still safe to walk around, I'm sure. And how do we know they haven't sent any of their men ahead? Jaunt countered, still holding on tightly. I've taken care of that, Taban, Devios answered casually. It's just the main horde itself we have to prepare for. And the sooner we start, the better. So let's get the guy up and forging already, Derek huffed, beginning to march out of the estate. But, damn it, Derek. Jaunt sighed, sensing that he wasn't going to give up that easily. What's going on, Jaunt? Another voice spoke out. When Devio looked, he saw a hooded redrak slowly walking down the stairs. We're about to be under attack, Lascivious, Derek explained promptly. Ormal, lots of them. Diviox came here to warn us, as well as help us out if we got any vanguards coming. Better get ready for what's about to happen. Lascivious looked to Diviox for confirmation, who nodded grimly. Cock, I only brought supplies for whamel poisoning, Lascivious cursed. There won't be much I can do beyond that. Don't you know any healing magic or something? Derek asked. I do, but I've never used it for an army. Lascivious gave a conflicted shrug. I can help a lot with petty injuries, or a few with life-threatening wounds. But that's it. Our legion has everything we need, Deviog said, standing up. As long as they get here first, it's all just a matter of hoping that our blades strike true. And on the topic of weapons, Derek, the Taban, Jaunt tells me you've made something? Crossbow? Derek sighed with a nod. Just one. It's not going to do much if we're fighting a big battle. But hey, if it kills Ormal, one more will help, right? I'm curious to see it, Deviog said before looking to Jaunt. Let me know when this demonstration is about to start. Will do. Jaunt nodded before wrapping Derek's arm around his neck. Come on, we better get to Brastus. As soon as the sun broke the horizon, the village became fully aware of their impending danger. As soon as Brastus heard what was going on, he instantly set to work what he waited for morning to do. And as the other villagers woke up and left their homes, that was when word began to spread. Now the atmosphere was tense, uncertain. Even with Divio and his Death Riders in their presence, the village still felt worried and fearful for their future. Once the sun was fully above the horizon, that was when Derek's crossbow was put on demonstration. Divio saw that a large crowd had formed out in a clearing by the village. After having a path formed for him, he froze in his tracks. Derek's crossbow. Although it was a strange design, Divio recognized it instantly. It was a repeater bow. It lacked the large storage box containing extra pila as well as a side lever to automatically draw and reload the bow. And Jaunt said that Derek came up with this? Who is this man? Is it because he was of gray fur? Does that mean the old legends are true, that somehow whenever a gray redrak was born or among others, fortune befalls them? Or maybe, could he be one of Abbott's followers, who decided to leave his tower and wander the old empire, sharing his knowledge? Last he heard, Abbott's followers were content to stay within the tower, embarking on their own quest for knowledge, rarely venturing outside of Iron Peaks. Considering what's going on, nothing fancy to say, Derek began, sitting on a chair that was brought out, Brastus wielding the repeater bow that was named a crossbow. This is a crossbow. Think of a bow, except it's much more powerful, and you don't need to spend your entire lives just to be considered decent with it. Brastus? With a nod, the smith took aim at a tree. Squeezing the lever, the crossbow fired its bolt. Divio felt his fur stand on end. Derek's design was not only functional, but just by his eyes alone, the pila was actually launched at a far higher speed than the repeater bow some of his men were issued. He barely even saw the pila in flight before seeing it wobble in the tree. Just like him, the village was also taken aback in wondrous amazement. But Divio was already waiting for the next step. If there was no automatic loading mechanism, what's the process for readying another shot? With a nod from Derek, Brastus demonstrated just that. Placing the legs of the strange laver against two bolts that protruded from each side of the main body, he then hooked it onto the bowstring. Devio saw his hand doing something on the other side. This is how you load another bolt, Derek explained. After you fire, you twist the nut so that the locking hooks are ready for a new shot. Then with the lever that you see here, you pull the string back. Once it's secure within the locking hooks, that's when you slap a new bolt on, and there you go. Ready to shoot. On cue, Brassus took aim again and fired another shot, the new pila, or bolt, embedding itself just below the other bolt. The village was slack-jawed, some letting out sharp exclaims. Even Brastus started to laugh in amazement. Before anyone asked, "No, I've never used a bow before," Brastus stated. "I just to look down the bolt and made a guess as to where it would land." "Not much else to show everyone," Derek said, standing up. "I'll defer to Jörn as to who gets the crossbow. There's not enough time to get practice with it before the Ormal comes, and there's not many bolts made yet, so whoever gets it, just do the best you can. All right?" Once the demonstration was over, the crowd descended into excited conversation, momentarily forgetting their approaching threat. Devios just stood there, still slack-jawed at what he just witnessed. Derek has to be one of Abet's followers. He just has to be. Who possesses the knowledge of physical science to be able to devise such a weapon? And with a different mechanism, as well as a more powerful draw strength too? Or, no, it can't be. Could this Derek actually be Terek? Or is it the other way around? Could Derek be the legendary Redrak Venex was obsessing over? The one who taught Abet everything he knows? If that is the case, then the questions Derek had, ones that no normal villager or citizen would ask, could Derek also have trained Skafin himself? Devio had never felt so confused and possibly awestruck before in his life. "Everyone, Skafin is here!" a villager shouted. Skafin expected as much, though it didn't bother him. He's actually glad that his mere presence is enough to lift their spirits. The village needs his help, and he'll give his own blood to protect it. He spotted his Death Rider Centurion, Devio, rushing towards him. "Excellent. That's a good sign." "What's the situation, Centurion?" Skafin demanded as soon as Devio stopped. "No Ormal here yet, sir," Devio answered promptly. "The raiders that broke off were dealt with easily, and we've gotten a lay of the land. Also, there's someone—" Skafin stopped listening. He caught a scent. Even after around 1,000 years of walking this world, this is something he's never forgotten. Something his own body would never forget. Derek's scent. Growing numb with hope and the air thinning, he shoved aside the rambling Centurion and started searching. Looking for the Derek he remembers among the crowd, the village. "You're looking for Derek, sir," Devio said with clear nervousness. "Grey Redrak, he's—" "Where?" Skafin interrupted again, the mere word causing his body to surge. "Where did you hear that name?" Deviox drew in a sharp breath, trying to keep his nerves calm. "Grey Redrak, a man, having trouble walking, wamel poison, past the crowd there, an emotion Skafin had never felt in centuries before. Fear. As soon as he heard about the poison, he felt terror like he never felt since that day. Since what happened in the ether. Had Derek been with them this whole time, and they just didn't look? No, can't be. If he was, he would have done something to show that he too made it through. No. Scarface saw it. He saw Derek fall to his death in that miasma of pure magic. Albert's scream ringing his ears. Derek's face haunting his dreams. With a stumble to his step, Scarface ran through the crowd, the villagers quickly making way for him. Derek was a Prommel, not a Redrak. Why is there a Grey Redrak daring to steal his name? But he can't just threaten him. What if it is Derek? But he died in the ether. Scarface had never felt so confused in his life. Never so desperate and hopeful. And there he was, the Grey Redrak. His legs wobbling some as another Redrak was helping him. There, a repeater bow among their person. Scarface had never felt so afraid before. He knew what he needed to say, but he just can't. His throat was too tight to say it. And not only that, but he can't allow himself to disturb the village, his own men, by the sight of the fearsome Crimson Redrak, breaking down like a woman scorned by her lover. It took an incomprehensible amount of willpower for Scarface to walk up to them. His entire arm racked with tremors as he delicately gripped the gray Redrak's shoulder, startling him. I've heard good things about you, Scarface began, requiring every single piece of concentration he could muster just to maintain some semblance of his image. I'd like to talk to you privately. What for? Derek asked nervously, the gray Redrak standing at only to Scarface's chest, forcing him to look up at the giant. To talk, Derek, Scarface answered, his name almost impossible to utter, but he also grew afraid. Did Derek not recognize him? Maybe it was because of his helmet. He'll take it off once they're in a private spot. Go on, lad, the other Redrak encouraged, letting him go. You don't turn down an honor such as meeting with Scafin himself. Okay. Derek nodded, his legs wobbling even more now from having to support his weight fully. Scarface felt the firestorm of rage billowing deep inside him. He'll have to find a Wamel camp and kill them all for what they've done. Here, let me help. Scarface extended his arms outward. Derek, unsure, thanked him and cautiously placed his hands on the giant Redrak's shoulders. Ever so delicately, Scarface picked up and carried Derek, giving him a respite from even assisted walking. And with this proximity, Scarface was convinced. This was Derek. The scent coming from him is exactly the same as when he found him in the ether, when Scarface grew up with Derek. They traveled through the village, gaining distance from the crowd, some persistent in following Scarface. They just needed a firm warning to send them the other way. Scarface finally found a spot private enough where he could stop putting on an image. So, Derek began stammering. What's up, Scafin? Why do you, do you not recognize me, Derek? Scarface questioned, his voice breaking under the terror of such a scenario. What? Derek was taken aback at that. Carefully setting him down, Scarface unfastened his helmet and slowly removed it, fighting his fearful reluctance. Once it was fully off, Scarface felt a chill on his face. He was actually crying. The last time he cried was after leaving the ether, when he was forced to accept that Derek died, or appeared to have died. It's me, Scarface stammered, his emotions bursting forth, all of his attempts to keep it down failing. Scarface, remember? In the first second, Derek was blank with confusion. Then, as he finally realized it, in the next second, he drew a shuddering breath. And then in the third, he too couldn't hold back. Scar, Derek muttered before launching himself into the armored Redrak. And as soon as he said that, Scarface felt another emotion that he's never felt before. Happiness. He was happy that Derek recognized him. Happy that Derek was alive. Happy at everything.